Hello, welcome to Culture TV and to our online program, Let's Speak Russian. This is lesson 11. So in this video, we'll be extending our list of words and phrases related to manners and etiquette. But before we get started on that though, let's first of all review all of the ones that we've seen already. So do you remember how to say hello in Russian? So the first option is Привет. Привет. If we want to be a bit more formal, then we will use Здравствуйте. Здравствуйте. And we saw as well that this can sometimes be shortened down to just Здрасте. Здрасте. Hello or higher. How about good morning? Yes, in Russian that will be Доброе утро. Доброе утро. Good day will be Добрый день. Добрый день. And then good evening is Добрый вечер. Добрый вечер. And finally good night is Доброй ночи. Доброй ночи. Very good. Now let's talk about manners. How would you say thank you in Russian? Yes, that's right. Спасибо. Спасибо. If you want to say thank you very much, then you just add on the word большое at the end to get спасибо большое, a large thank you. Please would be пожалуйста, пожалуйста. And in fact, you can also use this word as a reply to thank you. So I'm pleased to help you. Пожалуйста. The alternative here being не за что. Не за что. Which literally means for nothing, so you're welcome. So пожалуйста and не за что can both be used as replies to спасибо. Now, how would you say bye to someone in Russian? In an informal situation, you might use пока. Пока. Whereas if you want to be more formal, then до свидания. До свидания is the phrase that you would need. До свидания. Goodbye. You could also say до встречи. До встречи, which means see you soon. Now a few more phrases that we looked at. Всего доброго or всего хорошего both mean something like take care. And finally, спокойной ночи. Спокойной ночи means good night. So this is something you would say to other people before they go to bed. Alright, so that's everything we've seen so far. Now let's talk about apologizing in Russian. And there are quite a few ways to do this, and again this will depend on whom you're speaking to. So first of all we have извините. Извините. Извините, which means sorry. This is what you would use with formal address. If you want to apologize to a friend perhaps, then you would drop the last two letters to get извини. Извини, which means the same. An alternative is простите. Простите. And прости for informal address. Прости. All four of these words here mean sorry, and in fact also excuse me. So these can be used when you want to apologize, but also maybe to attract someone's attention. Just remember to select the correct word that corresponds to the form of address that you're using. Now there is one other phrase that you could use. It is rather formal. Прошу прощения. Прошу прощения. And this literally means I ask for your forgiveness. In English, maybe this is something like I apologize or perhaps I beg your pardon. But generally, this phrase is synonymous with the four words that we've seen already. Okay, now the last thing we need to talk about is the question, how are you? And how to answer it. In Russian, that will be как дела? Как дела? How are you? Literally, this means, how are things going? And whilst this is the most common way of asking how are you, there are a couple of variations that you might encounter. Как у тебя дела? Как твои дела? The formal equivalents being как у вас дела? Как ваши дела? And I would say that these are just ways of making the question a bit more personal. So, how are things going for you? Now, how would we go about answering this question? Well, that would depend on our mood, how we're feeling. So I suppose we could use this scale here, where on the left-hand side, if we're feeling excellent, really well, we might use отлично. Отлично. And отлично means excellent, really good. Then we have хорошо, хорошо, which is good or all right. Хорошо. Moving further down, we have нормально, нормально. This means okay. This is actually a false friend. It does not mean normal or normally. The only meaning of this word is okay, so to a reasonable, acceptable standard. Нормально. And lastly, if you're not feeling well at all, then you might use the word плохо. Плохо, which means bad. Плохо. If you want to ask the same question back, then you might say а у вас or а у тебя. А у вас, а у тебя, what about you? So this little word a at the start here literally just means what about. In your answer, you may wish to include very. In Russian, that will be очень. And then not very will be не очень. So, for example, you might say очень хорошо, really good. So now let's take a look at an example response to this question. Here it is. Pause the video now and try to translate it. So it reads, У меня очень хорошо, спасибо. А у тебя? У меня очень хорошо, спасибо. А у тебя? So we've seen this у вас, у тебя. If you want to say the same about yourself, to make the answer more personal, then you will say у меня, which literally means by me. So for me, things are going well in this case. Really well, actually. Очень хорошо means very well. And then спасибо, thank you. А у тебя? And you. How about you? Okay, now this brings up a few interesting points here. I often get asked by students whether or not saying спасибо, thank you, in these situations is at all necessary, and for that matter, is being polite and using manners common in Russia at all, especially in light of the stereotype of Russians being cold, miserable, mean, impolite, and unfriendly. And it's a really good question, and we'll be talking about this much more in later videos when we have discussions about cultural topics. But for now, the short answer is, well, yes, on the whole, being polite, saying please and thank you, and all of these sorts of things is less common in Russia than it is in, say, Western countries. There's a different culture surrounding this. You won't hear people saying please and thank you to each other that often. You won't see people smiling to each other on the streets. You won't see people holding doors for each other and so on. Now, this is not to say that all Russians are mean and nasty and unapproachable people. No, most of the time Russians are very pleasant, kind-hearted and warm people, especially in a very friendly and cordial atmosphere. It's just that generally with strangers, Russians tend to be a bit more reserved. And so don't expect people again, to smile at you. Don't expect people to thank you for asking them how you are, these sorts of things. It's not wrong at all to say thank you in this sort of situation. Just be aware that this is not as common as it is in the Western part of the world. That's all that I'll say for now. And now finally, to conclude this video, let's have a look at an example dialogue. So here it is. Again, pause the video, try to translate it, and if you could also read it out aloud, that would be great. But we'll go over it together in just a moment. So, here we are. Добрый вечер, Сергей. Здравствуйте, Николай. Как ваши дела? Хорошо, спасибо. А как у вас? Нормально, спасибо. Okay, so we have Добрый вечер, Сергей. Good evening, Sergey. Здравствуйте, Николай. Hello, Nikolai. So we can tell straight away that this is a formal situation. Как ваши дела? This confirms it. How are things going for you? Formal addresses being used here. Хорошо, спасибо. I'm good, thank you. А как у вас? And you? Нормально, спасибо. All right, thank you. So there we have it. You are now equipped with the complete set of basic words and phrases to do with manners and etiquette in Russian. Do keep going over these, you will be using them a lot. And that's it for now. If you have any questions, please ask in the comments. I'll see you next time in Lesson 12. Thank you very much for your attention. Goodbye.